After being one of the league's worst offensive teams year in, year out for the better part of a decade, the Anaheim Ducks have come out of the gate this season as one of the best offensive teams in the NHL. The rebuild is finally paying dividends on the score sheet, and they've racked up some points in entertaining fashion as a result. They still have some pretty major issues, but their games are fun to watch. Many of them so far were as high event as hockey gets, so let's take a look at how they've changed, what's gone right, what's gone wrong, what are the biggest areas of improvement, and why are they more fun to watch. This year, the Ducks value playing to the strength of their youthful, fast skaters with offensive talent, rather than having everyone focus on their weakness, their defensive potential. And of course, speed, skill with the puck, and offensive mindsets lend themselves to success on the rush, which is where they do most of their damage. But you do need a change in possession to get out in transition, so the transition offense all starts with their new defensive zone coverage. The zone defense is a relaxed, reactionary system rather than one that requires a ton of foresight or extreme cardio, and that keeps things simple. You aren't running around ragged or forcing the worst defensive forwards into the most critical spots and having D-men chase guys around the blue line. When the puck is not in your area, you collapse and clog the middle. When it is in your area, you pressure, forcing the opponent to turn away or make a pass, or you get in the lane of their shot. So either you maintain position for a one-on-one battle, you force them to make an error, or you block their shot. As soon as possession changes, the off-puck wingers are close to their ideal position for quick breakout passes, and even cheat a little bit if possession might change, and the centers are close to receive the low support pass. But also, more than we've seen in a very long time, they have been willing to pay the price to break out with possession instead of chipping pucks up the boards, and once they're out, they're in their element, and again, transition is where the Ducks have scored most of their goals. And the young guns are leading the charge when it comes to finishing those chances, which says as much about them being put into positions to succeed, as it does them taking the next step and having more confidence when they get high danger chances. And yeah, that's primarily why these games have a thrill factor. They generate lots of odd man rushes with speed, and they've been finishing their chances at an incredible rate. However, their better games were not only so entertaining because of the chances the team forces, but the ones they give up as well. Again, this is high event hockey, often high scoring hockey at both ends. So far, the Ducks have some of the worst defensive numbers in the league. But in a way, that's also good news depending on how you look at it, because while they've been able to outscore their problems for the most part so far, when the offense inevitably regresses here and there's lots of room for drastic improvement on defense. But they have to make those adjustments. They're always going to give up a couple where there's nothing much you can do, tips or weird bounces will happen, and you can say so-and-so should be a bit faster to the puck or to box out. In a perfect world, sure, but most of the Ducks' critical own zone lapses have come from flat-out easily avoidable, often totally unforced errors rather than the system being exploited, whether that's an error with the puck or the entire team just puck watching and leaving someone wide open on the weak side. Though again, it is a safe system for the most part. However, they do tend to bleed chances from up high, and that's where a pretty rigid box and one does tend to let them down. Their center's default position is relatively useless when the puck is up high, when the opponent is in an umbrella, and when the opponent develops possession off of a scramble, or when they face a control 2-3 and the puck is out high. You can see the confusion here and there from the centers and the weak side wingers, and that's the benefit of the hybrid mindset instead of the zone, because a lot of the time these guys just end up covering no one and screening their own goalie. So perhaps we see an adjustment there in the future, we can only hope. However, something they can clean up relatively easily in their own zone are their double teams. Again, the zone is reactionary, but since they also don't want to just allow possession and play like a penalty kill or only rely on errors and winning one-on-one battles to regain possession, they've been running these double teams. And they don't just come from the centers as the and one of the box and one. It's obviously being encouraged for wingers to do it as soon as a player is forced to turn towards the boards, or if there'll be a third man in on a 50-50 puck. And it does work, but the timing has to be spot on, because it almost always gets them into trouble when it's not. And they have a tendency to jump the gun or hesitate and arrive late, but I think Quenneville and company will eventually iron that stuff out. And the area I think that's most important to improve in is their transition defense. As good as their offense has been in transition, that's also how they've been exploited defensively. About half of their goals against have been even strength transition goals. I didn't think their transition defense would be good, and it's indeed been a problem as I expected, but it's not from immobile defensemen getting beaten like I predicted. For the most part at least. Gudis will still get your heart rate up, but yeah, most of their D-men have actually held their own when they're on the defensive side of the puck one-on-one, but as a team they've been getting killed by odd man rushes. And it's one thing to say, well, the D should gap up, be sure when they pinch, and just play every breakout perfectly. It's not gonna happen. This is a young defense core. The group that's played the most this season so far has an average age of 24, and most of them are very offense-minded, which often works in their favor to force second chances, but they also get caught pinching or trying to hold the ozone a lot. Before the season started, I assumed we'd be watching some incredibly boring LA Kings 2.0 style hockey, supplementing the defensive weaknesses with a consistent 1-2-2, and it's essentially been the opposite. It's full steam ahead, all gas, no brakes, 3 forwards pressing. They don't seem to want to sacrifice their 2 deep, 1 high forecheck, which often results in the F3 getting very low to cut off increasingly low breakout passes, or getting open for a pass on a turnover, but often getting caught in no man's land or on the wrong side of the breakout pass. So maybe you'd like to see the F3 be a little more careful, or just have a moderately more glass half empty mindset and stay on the higher side of the opposition winger, at least more often than almost always anticipating the forecheck will be in time or somehow already have caused a turnover. But that's the system they're playing, and at the same time, it's hard not to like them leaning towards additional high danger chances. But then the defense really has to pick their spots and cut their losses here and there. So if they want the all-out forecheck, you'd like to see the strong side D-man be a little more cautious, because you're absolutely screwed if no one's even close to covering the pinching D if the forecheck breaks down. Obviously easier said than done in the moment, but they kinda do need to pick a lane to lighten the load on their goalies and defense. They obviously like their defensemen going all in as the Ep.4, which looks great when it works, but again, that mindset obviously makes counterattacking very easy. Same thing goes for any 2-3-0 zone possession system use. The defense are clearly encouraged to pinch a ton, and you can cherry pick examples of forwards or D-men getting lost and ending up open up high, but of course any change in possession is often devastating when the D get in deep down the wall. Not to mention, for the same reasons they give up even strength goals in transition, they also end up taking most of their penalties in transition, which aren't the absolute worst ones you can take, but it would obviously be nice to mitigate them. And speaking of bad penalties, again, discipline is still a big issue this year. They're shorthanded way too often, and that's been a worrying trend, especially as of late. However, at least the up and down style going in both directions does result in penalties both ways, as they've been drawing their fair share on the rush as well. The Ducks are finally not at the very bottom of the league in terms of net penalties for the first time in over a decade, and they've actually been hanging around the top 10 in terms of net and penalties drawn. Moving on, another big reason they're having better results, and are more fun to watch, is that their special teams have drastically improved compared to previous seasons. They've had just about, or often literally the worst power play and penalty kill every year for a good long while, because of stagnant, directionless power plays and passive penalty kills. And while again, yes, certain players have definitely improved individually this year, the new assistant coaches and their decision making has been crucial, and that of course goes a long way to being a winning team as the season goes on and affects their even strength play very positively. They're finally aggressive on the PK, which is really the only way to kill penalties these days. With how skilled players are, just letting them have all the time and space they want is simply naive at this point. And though the 1-3 neutral zone defense is the league standard to attempt to defend against the drop pass entry, which the Ducks have used in previous seasons as well, there's been much more of an effort to maintain proper gaps and force the opposition to make plays right at the blue line or resort to dumping it in, rather than the 1-3 just being sort of a formality. So thank the coaching staff and Ryan McGill. Also, again, the coaches have decided that playing your best players in all situations, should they be capable, only leads to good things. And when you have legit offensive talent out against the opponent's power play, they will very often be up against weaker defensive players, so you have the perfect recipe for a counterattack. And yeah, obviously Leo Carlsson and Troy Terry have been lethal on the penalty kill, forcing dangerous shorthanded chances almost every game, and it's paid massive dividends. But recently, they've been getting shelled as a team on the PK, and you might say it seems like that duo is getting too fatigued with all that ice time. Well, this is actually the first time when making one of these Ducks videos that I actually had to redo some voiceover, because I was going to suggest they move Carlsson, Terry, and Lacombe down to the second or third PK unit to keep them fresh, and to enable them to attack a tired power play unit, also to get some better face-off guys out there, at least for the start of the shift, and they actually completely took them off the PK. So nice to see them acknowledging the poor results of late. However, they very likely don't win some of the games that they've won if Carlsson and Terry aren't on the PK. So we'll see how that goes going forward.
Little crisscross, drops it off for Terry, back in front, and Carlsson scores shorthanded.
And of course, the power play. Again, simply playing your best players on the first unit has been awesome, but also adding a layer of deception by finally having these guys move to force defenders to make compromises has been a revelation. And it's still very much a work in progress, but it's also not far and away the worst in the league, like just about every year for the past handful of seasons, so that's a positive. And the effort that Jay Woodcroft has put in has not gone unnoticed. Here's an interesting adjustment he's made. Obviously, most teams will like to have one-time options on the flank from both sides. As far as a left side one-timer, the Ducks basically have two right shot trigger options, Terry and Seneca, but Woodcroft is often not using them there. Instead of the right shot on the left wall, he's using Carlsson there as a primary passing duo with Lacombe and to sneak back door, while the primary option is to funnel everything to Gauthier for a one-timer from the right, and for good reason. But Woodcroft isn't just hoping the defense makes a mistake and leaves the right open. Again, there's lots of movement to threaten tips and backdoor passes, but also to support that primary right side one-timer option. Instead of Terry or Seneca on the far left, he's got them in the bumper spot, as that opens them up for a one-timer of their own should they have the space, as the pucks move to the right side trigger. And them being a legit one-time threat from there also makes the high left side penalty killer respect the middle, so that can suck them towards the middle, leaving the left shots on the right wall with more space to execute. Better yet, he often has Terry and Kreider swap spots on the fly to open up a one-time option in the bumper spot when the puck is on the side of the ice that matches the way they shoot, to set up the same threat from both sides. Not to say this will always be the case, but it's been a good strategy to create space so far. This also forces defenders to make great reads, and to get further out of position to get all the way across Terry or Kreider's body than if they just left one guy as the designated bumper option no matter where the puck is. And it's just nice to see Woodcroft taking the job seriously, like this finally isn't just pop out 5 guys and pray a seam opens up like what, the past 5 seasons. So yeah, you love to see someone, trying who's being paid to run the power play. They've even went with 4 forwards on a 4-on-3. Nice to see distinct, bold decision making, especially early in the year. And again, they've had pretty promising results so far. And that's the kind of coaching that makes me believe the early season offense and success wasn't just a flash in the pan. And now that the power play has been struggling in recent games, I think we're going to need to see another adjustment pretty soon. And I think giving Zellweger some first unit time is a good place to start because they're standing still again way too much lately. And to quote my man Jack Sparrow, anyway, yeah, the all-gas, no-break style, dominating and getting dominated on the fly, taking and drawing a lot of penalties, all leads to a lot of goals, and essentially kill-or-be-killed hockey. And that's mostly why many of these games have been so entertaining. This Ducks team makes Kings games entertaining, and that's saying something. I listened to the LA broadcast for that game, and their commentary guys seemed abnormally happy that they were getting dragged into a back-and-forth game.
Get some support, Turcotte. One-timer! What a save by Husso and Kempe!
But again, things tend to get ugly when they're not outscoring their deficiencies. Yes, they've had a tough schedule to start the season travel-wise, but when the finishing isn't there, they don't seem to have anything too drastic to fall back on other than juggling lines, and yes, there have been injuries, but that'll happen. So when the going gets tough and the team's not scoring, you'd like to see them double down on that forecheck and get physical. The old, when you aren't scoring, you better be hitting someone thing, Because at times this team looks way too meek when the going gets tough. But anyway, let's get back to some positives. A lot of their early success and overall intrigue can be attributed to star players and roster changes. So with that, let's talk about some individuals and new faces. There's lots of season left, but so far the change in personnel on the ice has worked out quite well too. When you trade away a dynamic fan favorite like Trevor Zegras at his lowest value in the offseason and then he starts producing at a point per game pace, the new faces need to be pretty effective to feel like the offseason was a success. And here we are. Even though we've barely seen Granlund, it does seem to have been a success. Also, let's just keep in mind the Cam Fowler discourse. Last year it was, obviously this is why you don't judge a player from a terrible team like the Ducks, look how good he is with the Blues. Greg Cronin was obviously holding him back. And this year the Blues look horrible, and I've seen a few, shall I say, familiar comments from their fans. Though I do genuinely hope that Zegras continues to prove the doubters wrong, until the Flyers play the Ducks, that is. Then let's hope that overrated Instagram hockey guy who plays with no confidence gets no power play or ice time in general, right? Anyway, the new faces. Mikael Granlund has been a nice addition, though yeah, he's unfortunately missed a bunch of time with injury, so it's a small sample size, but when he has played, he's always made his line mates better, being the great playmaker that he is. I said in the season preview that they're essentially giving Granlund the cap space that Zegras took up, and they're not going to have any cap space after signing Karlsson and Gauthier next year, so you can essentially include that Granlund signing in the Zegras trade if you'd like. One area, aside from adding some speed that he drastically improves the Ducks in, is the face-off dot, something they've really missed lately as he's been out. Honestly, it's so simple, but it's one of the biggest changes from last year. The first step in valuing possession is valuing face-offs. It's obviously not everything, but you're less likely to give up goals off the draw, and you're more likely to get out of the defensive zone, get to the offensive zone, and set the next line up for success when you can start with the puck. They're still not very good as a team, but they're finally not the worst in the league. And when you've been absolutely abysmal, getting even moderately better makes a huge difference. Their best stretches of games and individual games this year have often been the ones where they've done well in the dot. Not a coincidence. And having Granlund in the lineup, along with Karlsson getting a little bit better, makes a massive difference. And since they've been getting a good amount of shots on net, they've been getting a good amount of offensive zone face-off starts. Yes, again, it's early, but so far this is the first time in 12 years that they've averaged more offensive zone starts than defensive ones. Anyway, back to the new guys. Washed Ranger Chris Kreider has been pretty good. The power play / net front specialist is right back on form in that area after an injury-riddled season. His slippery ability to get himself into threatening areas at just the right moment are extremely valuable to the Ducks power play, and he seems to be a glue gun as far as chemistry goes. Then of course there's rookie Beckett Seneca. They simply added another legit top 6 forward to the lineup out of thin air. That'll help most teams drastically improve and be more fun to watch from one year to the next, won't it? He's been doing lots of stuff well, tons of offensive flash, and he's in the rare group of young players who seem to be as or even more comfortable handling the puck in the NHL than they were in juniors. Really weird how that can happen, but yeah, he plays like he's been in the league for a decade in terms of confidence. There aren't too many flashy rookies who look like they've already scored hundreds of goals when they pot one. Just no big deal for the kid whatsoever. Job's not done type of attitude. And again, let's talk about his physical game because that's not getting nearly enough praise. I mentioned this in the season preview. There's lots of all offense guys on this team, so the front office wants well-rounded players to affect the game in all areas. And Seneca is already proving to be more than a one-dimensional offensive guy, and he's just getting his career started. And this is a mentality and competitive mindset, not a formality. I can't believe there were Ducks fans criticizing that one charging penalty as a bad play. First, charging is just about the dumbest penalty in the sport. Second, and I'm going to sound like 60 years old here, but sorry to anyone who doesn't like guys playing on that edge, the aggressive mindset to go for a hit in that situation is what you need to win in the playoffs. That style has always been in the cards for Seneca, but since game 1 he's exceeded expectations. He's been more physical than he was in the OHL, and he's been one of the Ducks' most physical forwards. That, his confidence, and his patience with possession is also why we have to remember that it's pretty pointless to form a full opinion on players before they're in the NHL, whether that's juniors, camp, or preseason. Things can completely change for the better once you're in the league, and it certainly helps when you play with really good teammates, which often tips the scales in favor of really skilled players. All of the other young Ducks jumped into very subpar situations to start their careers, while Seneca has evidently joined the team at a pretty beneficial time, so his game will likely get polished very quickly. He'll eventually feel like he has less to prove, and also he'll be more aware of simple things like how long everyone's been on the ice to make better decisions with his zone entries. All in all, it seems like he's already been learning very quickly, and he's been earning some significant ice time as a result, which is pretty rare for rookie forwards. And then there's Ian Moore, who has all but guaranteed the right side defense will be looking different next year, as he's played a very quiet, sound, and responsible game for the most part. Back to the old guard, and speaking of right-shooting defensemen, Jacob Trouba is having sort of a career year at 31 in a contract year. He's playing very solid defense, and is now one of the D-men you're most comfortable seeing in a tough spot, yet is also putting up nice offensive numbers, which everyone expected. Yeah, he's definitely thrived in the simplicity and predictability of the zone, and at this rate, he's certainly going to give management questions next year. If he keeps it up, you'd be crazy not to bring him back, right? Well, as solid as he's been, it's very hard to anticipate what they're going to get going forward, but if they do keep him around, it'll be very interesting to see what happens with the defense pipeline on both sides. If they continue to look competitive and legitimately playoff bound, something tells me one or two of these young guys will be moved instead if they can retain Trouba at a team-friendly deal. Also, his partner Olin Zellweger has taken a big step this year, to me all but guaranteeing he'll be here for the long haul. I've said it at some point before, but he's got the skill set that everyone covets when it comes to modern defensemen, and he's utilizing his skating and ability to make plays in any direction to the fullest, with so many successful solo zone exits and pinches, and he joins the rush as much as any defenseman, and that style is a nice counterbalance to the more risk-adverse Trouba, and the fact that they often end up playing more offense than defense, as a result of Zellweger's relatively measured aggression, is part of the reason they quietly look like one of the better defense pairs in the entire league on the stat sheets. Anyway, really, there's only so much you can say about the entire D-corps as individuals, and whether it's confidence or mobility, they have their issues to overcome, but they've been putting in the effort while pressing to get the forwards second chances and getting very little help in transition, so there's only so much you can ask for. But anyway, yeah, when you look up and down the roster and in the prospect cupboard, the Ducks are seemingly once again verging on having an embarrassment of riches, and that opens the door for experimenting to find the best group when everyone's finally healthy. I think they may eventually realize that they can't sacrifice their speed if they choose to go with a more veteran-heavy lineup, but we'll see. And yeah, there are a few more individuals I'd like to highlight who have been amongst the best in the league in their roles, and have certainly been leading the charge from an entertainment standpoint. Of course, Lucas Dostal has been fantastic. If you're entertained by goaltending, look no further than one of the most unique and proactive goalies in the league. He's proving he's not just a stand-on-your-head when your team's getting caved guy, but one who's capable of handling the pressure when their team is in big games. I think it's safe to say he's the real deal, and I don't think it's crazy to say that he's been playing himself into Vezina conversation, which is more realistic if the Ducks finish the season well, as that's a very team success-based acknowledgement. But yeah, yet again, nothing short of remarkable stuff from Dostal. Now, as I mentioned in the season preview, as young as they may be, this is the year for the designated high-ceiling forwards to start performing and finishing like star players, and a few of them have genuinely taken a step in that direction. Cutter Gauthier is one of those guys. This is one of the fastest players in the league, with one of the best releases in the league. Really, I don't think there's been a lefty with a release like this since Kyle Connor took off, and Gauthier is not shy about using it. The kid is as trigger happy as they come. He's been near or at the top of the league in shots the whole season thus far. In a sort of under the radar way, he's also proved to be very versatile, as he's tailored his game directly to fit the Ducks' needs. Because he's smart, skilled, coachable, humble, and willing to make sacrifices to make the team better, he's turned into a fantastic winger and uses his skill in transition, which fits the Ducks' style like a glove, and he's in for a big payday. Next up, Troy Terry. And man, this is the best Terry's ever looked. And he's been tortured for a long time, so it's nice to see him hitting his peak in the prime of his career and finally playing on a winning team. He's always been an underrated playmaker due to his tendency to hold onto the puck, but a lot of the time now he's actually a pass-first guy, and he's been right up there amongst the league leaders in primary assists as a result. I said in the season preview that Terry had to produce at a higher level if he's going to be an offense-only guy, and he's certainly done it so far. And that of course brings us to Leo Carlsson. The kid has turned into one of the best forwards in the league right before our eyes in his third season season, looking like the second coming of Peter Forsberg, while also looking like he has the defensive tools to eventually become a Kopitar or Barkov. But yeah, already the speed, edge work, puck handling, puck protection, playmaking, and shot are world class, with the hands and footwork feints to beat anyone one-on-one, along with the confidence and guts to carry the puck to utilize his skill set that, I'll say it, are comparable to Connor McDavid's style. I say that because his footwork in particular is fabulous. He loves to force defenders to respect the crossover, but then dig in the opposite foot, turn it into a stutter step, and go back against the grain, forcing defenders to turn and get into desperation mode. But anyway, yeah, the Ducks finally have a legitimate star player who can carry the team on his back and create something out of nothing at any given moment all on his own. It's been a very long time since they've had one of those guys. Really, you could make the argument that they haven't had that since Paul Kariya. You could feasibly throw Terry in that group too. He just wasn't blessed with absurd speed and or size, but anyway, yeah. A lot of us expected Karlsson to be great. The signs were all there, and sure, it's still early in the season and his career, but for those who only see the highlights and stats, he's so much more than a few flashy plays. Whether it's solid defense like that or beautifully timed picks like these, he makes so many high IQ plays that make the Ducks a better team. All stuff you love to see from your franchise center. And the numbers he's put up are one thing, but this isn't a case of luck or completely unsustainable shooting. He forces countless high danger chances game in, game out, many that unfortunately haven't gone his way, that could have his stats absolutely juiced if they did, and eventually more of those will go in. Also, his teammates will continue to get more accustomed to his skating and playmaking ability, and Karlsson will be a dominant, driving force for a long time in Anaheim. From what we, the public, can see, the on-ice play, he's the heartbeat of the team, the main play driver, and the team tends to go as he does. Please give him 10 digits long-term along with the captaincy next year, please. But either way they go, they're having a fantastic example set on the ice. And regardless, it's nice to see the young guys finally given designated leadership roles this year, something I've thought would be beneficial for quite some time, as again, I think certain players set the bar, and no matter how young they are, it's worth acknowledging. Which brings me to this video's Patreon question, which comes from Victric, and it's simply, what do you think of Lacombe so far? Well, of course you can point the finger at coaching, but they also need a lot more from some individuals. In particular, the two guys they just handed big contracts to. And with Lacombe, I mean, overall he's been very good. I don't think it was reasonable for anyone to expect a repeat of last year from an offensive stats standpoint, and I don't think many rational people were, including Verbeek, though despite the slow start, he might eventually get there anyway. Really, he's probably the Ducks' most consistent player, and he is brilliant, just sometimes less is more. And I think it's simply time to lower his minutes a bit. He doesn't necessarily look fatigued all that often, but clearly it's just too much here and there, because he's been getting caught in transition a lot this year, and there's often been very little benefit to having him on the first unit of the special teams thus far, so perhaps that's where they could cut some ice time back. But thankfully it seems like his confidence hasn't wavered all that much, and as long as that doesn't change, I don't think there's anything to worry about long term. And with McTavish, I mean, he's been clutch here and there and very opportunistic, but they signed him and traded Zegras because he's supposed to be a play-driving second-line center every game. There isn't much middle ground with him. When he's cooking, that line is phenomenal, and when he's not just par for the course, just making safe or solid plays guy. He's pretty much invisible, unless he's taking more horrendous penalties, and for the most part he's been a liability on defense, so something has to give. It seems like a confidence thing a lot of the time, so hopefully he can stay out of his own head and be consistent, because they're a whole different team when he's fully engaged. But yeah, as entertaining, for better or worse as the Ducks have been, and regardless of how long they've hung on to the top spot in the division, there are moments where this team looks like a 100-point playoff team and moments where they look like a 70-point lottery team. So I don't know if this is a hot take, but they could really use more out of Quenneville here and there. Again, as happy as fans might be with the results under him early on, changing the defensive zone coverage and telling the defense to pinch, which backfires more often than not, is not enough to hang your hat on. And they still have goaltending steel and keep them in games that they don't deserve to win way too often. That second game against the Blackhawks was a prime example of how reluctant they've been to change their game plan. They blow a 3-0 lead, then Mrazek gets hurt, leaving them to put in a cold third-string goalie in Husso for the last 10 minutes of the third period, so it's a prime time to lock everything down, play a 1-2-2 and try and squeak out a point, but they didn't change anything, ended up allowing 5 straight and left Chicago with nothing. And the really harsh truth is that if they hadn't been getting finishing from Kreider, or massive individual jumps from Karlsson and Gauthier, and if they hadn't added Seneca to the lineup, all stuff that last year's beloved coach didn't have, there might be a few alarm bells going off. Nevertheless, all you can do is enjoy what they have built, and try to embrace this roller coaster ride of a season. The highs are high, the lows are low, and things can flip on a dime from one day to the next. One game, it's nothing but costly defensive errors and being punished for their high-risk play style, and you're like, f*** this f***ing team 7 f***ing years, how about some f***ing coaching adjustments?
I hate hockey and I don't like kids.
And the next game, it's exhilarating total dominance, and you're like, the Ducks are f***ing back, behold this conference, there is simply no way this isn't a f***ing playoff team.
Are we Ducks or what?
And yeah, The swings are so big that whatever happens on a game-to-game basis can often almost wipe out the previous game from your brain. However, it's important not to forget either side of the coin if you're going to analyze things rationally. But I genuinely think this team is for real, and that most of the offense is sustainable, especially if the D continue to play high-risk, high-reward hockey. They just have to find that balance and pick their spots to pinch, keep adjusting their special teams, and get those blown coverages in their own zone sorted out. But yeah, one way or another, this is must-see hockey. Even when they're having terrible outings and it seems like all hope is lost, don't turn off these Ducks games, because these kids and these goalies might just treat you to something straight out of the Disney series. But anyway, hope you enjoyed this, and yeah, let's temper expectations and keep being pleasantly surprised rather than disappointed if we can, and stay patient before we plan the making the playoffs parade. They have proven that they can generate offense at a very high rate, and that they can beat some of the league's best teams with that firepower, along with quite a few big saves. But regardless, finally being relevant and entertaining is worth celebrating. So let's enjoy the many positives, the adjustments they have made, watching some of the young guys grow into fantastic players, how nice it is to legitimately look forward to the games, the fact that there's more eyes on the team, and of course, because it really seems like
Quack attack is back, Jack!